as Phil alluded to, my name is Bryan Prosko. I work with traffic planning and design, project manager and shareholder with the company. I've been.
Could you speak into the
Can you
microphone?
speak into the microphone?
The mic's on. I've been involved with reviewing and providing input on an as-needed basis for the town on various planning board applications and zoning board applications since 2014. And we were asked by the town to look at this project independently, do an independent review of the potential traffic impacts, and particularly, is the roundabout feasible at this location? So we really boiled it down to 4 questions that we were trying to answer. Again, is the roundabout feasible at this location? Does the project improve performance at this particular location? What are the impacts this project may have on the corridor and the overall network? And can we design this roundabout to improve conditions for those vulnerable users of pedestrians, bikes, people that aren't in their automobile? So to that end, I just want to kind of set the framework of kind of the things that we're looking at in terms of the traffic velocity. But we're comparing no-build conditions to build conditions. And what no-build conditions really means is we took the current traffic volumes that you see at these intersections, and then we layer on known area developments that may happen by the time this project could potentially be built. And for that time frame, we're looking at the year 2022. So to get to that 2022 level, we included traffic that was associated with the potential planned parking authority's Lot 10 garage. And then traffic also associated with the 2 redevelopment plans in the area at the train station and Water Street, Phase 2. And then also on top of that, additional growth is added to account for regional traffic volumes that may increase based on development or traffic patterns changing outside of the study area. So that gets you to no-build conditions. And to make that comparison from no-build to build, what we're looking at is to get there, we add the traffic that this site is anticipated and projected to add to the network. And then knowing this context, being so close to the central business district, the office nature of this type of use, we do anticipate seeing an increased pedestrian activity through this area, particularly at the Morristown and Spring Street intersection. So that traffic volume for pedestrians was also added into the model. And then finally, we layer in whatever infrastructure improvements potentially would be done with this project that are being proposed. So that gets you to the build conditions, and then we want to compare no build to build and see if there's any impacts at these study area intersections, and are the intersections operating acceptably, sufficiently. And how we do that is we're really measuring what we call level of service, and it's really the amount of delay that you may experience on average at an intersection. And we take that number that you see in delay in seconds and equate it to a letter grade, like you're in school. It's a report card. So level service A is best, least amount of delay. It goes down to level service F with the most amount of delay. So A through B, C, D, E, F. So we try to keep it where we can make that comparison. So that kind of lays the framework of what we're trying to compare to see what potential impacts we may see. Again, as Phil alluded to, this is the transportation network, so it ran from the green on Morris Street out to Ridgedale, and then from Speedwell Avenue on Spring Street corridor down to Morris. So it encompasses 10 intersections, essentially. And we've talked a lot, I think, in the previous meetings about the roundabout as a proposed solution at the intersection of Morris and Spring, but there are other improvements that are potentially getting done with this project, particularly signal timing changes along both corridors to try to provide better progression along both those corridors, as well as potentially some changes to provide some additional through lanes in certain areas to get that throughput through there and potentially reduce any delays or impacts. So getting really into the questions that we were asked, is this roundabout feasible? That's the first thing that we looked at. So we wanted to know the design that the applicant's traffic engineers have put forward, does it meet recommended standards that are set, national standards by Federal Highway Administration and some other guidance. And we're really looking at certain geometric elements. So we're looking at the inscribed diameter, which is here, which is essentially the width of the roundabout. There's certain parameters, should it be certain X number of feet wide, and that plays into the deflection that you may see going through the roundabout. The deflection causes you to slow down going through the roundabout, makes it safer, and it also could impact the capacity if it's too small or if it's too wide. You may go through too fast. So we want to look at inscribed diameter. We looked at the entry radius, entry width, entry angle. All these geometric elements play into not only the capacity of this potential roundabout, but the safety of it as well. So just to go back and answer what we found. So we compared what they designed versus the national guidance that we see, and generally all of those recommended guidance are met. There's some that are at the minimum value level, but that's understandable given this context. The building's fairly close to the road, not a lot of width to widen too much. So we felt comfortable that most of those design guidance are within the range that they should be. So the second part of looking at the roundabout feasibility was really the operation, and really we took an isolated look at this roundabout in particular. Doesn't function properly. And the key performance metrics that we looked at was a volume to capacity ratio. Essentially, volume to capacity is how much capacity could this roundabout handle in terms of volume, and how much volume are they putting through this intersection, so can it handle those numbers? And that value really is 85% of capacity. So the volume should be 85% of what it theoretically can handle. So looking at the values that you see in the build condition, again, with their potential development and the traffic impacts that you may see, as well as the nearby developments that may happen by 2022, as well as the regional growth. Also looking at the increased pedestrian activity that you may see at the intersection, all of those values for all the lanes of the intersection are below that recommended threshold. So we were comfortable that from an operation perspective, isolated operation perspective, it is feasible to put a roundabout at this location. The third aspect of is it feasible was to look at is queuing of vehicles from the adjacent intersections going to back into the roundabout, causing gridlock conditions. So we don't want traffic backing up from the green into the roundabout, from their proposed signal at Spring Place, or the signal at Lafayette, backing into the roundabout, not having the ability for vehicles to circulate around. So we ran some independent modeling of the simulations to see are vehicles going to be spilling back into the roundabout and causing an gridlock condition. Based on our findings and our analysis, we did not see that. We did not see spillback conditions or gridlock that would be impeding the use of this intersection as a roundabout. So again, we felt that it was feasible from that perspective. So moving on to the second question that we were asked was, does this project improve the performance of this particular intersection of Morris and Spring Street? We looked at it two ways. We looked at the overall intersection performance. How is it going to operate? No build conditions without their development, with their development on top of the build conditions. And then we looked at it again at the critical movement, which is that Spring Street left approach to eastbound Morris Street. So first we looked at the overall intersection, and what we were finding in these results was the overall level of service, the overall delay that you experience at the intersection is going to decrease fairly significantly, up to over 60%. And that's understandable given the nature of a roundabout versus a traffic signal. Traffic signals give a priority to certain movements, which cause increased delays for certain movements. A roundabout really takes a blind eye to that, and just it's multiple yield conditions for each approach. when you get there, you have an appropriate gap to go through the roundabout and you take it. So these results, again, are based on our independent modeling of the intersection, comparing no build to build conditions. Second part of that was looking at that critical movement from Spring Street, southbound to eastbound Morris Street. And we know that it backs up fairly significantly, particularly in the afternoon. And we're seeing a decrease in vehicle queuing for that southbound approach, both in the morning and in the afternoon. And we're seeing a decrease in the delay that you're experiencing for that movement, both in the morning and afternoon. Again, these results are based on our independent modeling of this intersection. So that, again, leads us to believe that this project with this roundabout will be an improvement at that intersection in terms of operation. So moving to the third question, how does this project and this roundabout impact the overall network and the corridors of Morris Street and Spring Street? We focused on how long is it going to take you to travel through those corridors? And is it going to increase significantly from no build, without their development, to build with the redevelopment project? We took a very conservative estimate and approach to this. We looked at, if you go from point A to point B, how quickly do you do it based on the posted speed limit, and there's no other cars on the road. And then we added in the delay that you'd experience at each intersection that you'd go through. The reason we did this was, one, to be highly conservative, to give a very conservative estimate, but two, we think this type of simpler review of corridor travel times can be utilized as the town potentially moves forward with some of those mobility improvements that they're talking about, and look at capital improvements, A versus B, which one, from a cost-benefit perspective, doesn't make sense. Simplest terms. So what we were finding in this highly conservative estimate is that a majority of the travel times through these corridors would be reduced by up to a minute. Two movements, we saw a modest increase of 30 seconds, but no more than 30 seconds. So when we look at it on a holistic basis, looking at all the corridors that you would potentially be traveling through, we don't see this as an adverse impact to traveling through these corridors. And then the next thing that we looked at was the level of service. So we talked about level of service in the beginning. It's a great measurement to look at the delay that you'd experience on average going through each individual intersection overall. And we looked at no build conditions again, and build conditions with the redevelopment project. And these little circles here, the circle on the top is the morning, and the circle on the bottom is the afternoon peak hours. And the gradient is A through F. Green is good, F is poor. Or, excuse me, red is poor. So this is the no build condition. And then when we go to build condition, you can see all of the colors generally stay the same, except for these two intersections. So there is a slight impact at both of these intersections. And I want to give you the exact number so you have it. So at the Morris Street and Ridgedale Avenue intersection, there is an impact in the weekday afternoon peak hour. And the level of service changes from a C to a D, and that equates to an increase in overall delay by 12.4 seconds. So it's Ridgedale Avenue. The second one is Morris Street and Elm Street. And again, it's in the weekday PM, so the afternoon commuter peak hour. And you're seeing a change in level of service from a D to an E, and an increase in seconds of delay by 13.6 seconds. So there are the two impacts that we see in terms of the overall network that's been studied. And the redevelopment plan does have language talking about how can that be mitigated. And it specifically mentions that the redeveloper shall submit a report prepared by a traffic engineer that identifies a proposed mitigation measure, substantiates their impacts, and then provides estimates, and then from there we can figure out what the best solution is at these two locations, and what can be done there, and what makes the most sense. So that was the third question. Fourth question was, how can we best accommodate those vulnerable users at this intersection? So bicyclists, pedestrians, visually impaired pedestrians, transit, anybody that's not an automobile. So today, based on the current design, there are some elements that have been implemented as part of this project that will enhance the experience for pedestrians and bikes. And that includes the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which are the lights that flash when you want to cross the street. And they provide an enhancement, and visually enhancement, so that vehicles know that pedestrians are crossing. That's been identified and incorporated into the concept at this point from the roundabout. There's also the raised lane dividers that we've asked to be incorporated into the design. The traffic engineers have done that at this point. And that is, you'll see that around the circulating roadway. And that's to, one, reduce weaving happening in the roundabout, which we don't want to happen. And two, for those bicyclists that feel comfortable enough to drive through, ride their bike through a roundabout. We don't want vehicles changing lanes and not seeing a bike and hitting them. So that's been incorporated in. They've also incorporated in raised splitter islands, they're called, so they're raised medians that shorten the crossing for pedestrians. So if you're a pedestrian here and you want to go to the green, you would cross this leg first and only look at traffic coming from this direction. When you get to the middle, if you want to stop and feel safe stopping, which is the reason for that raised crossing, you would then stop and then change your focus to this side of the street. So you'd look up Spring Street, see if anybody's coming, and then you would go. The reason for that is to shorten your crossing, so now you're not crossing 4 lanes of traffic, you're crossing 2 at a time. And it's also, it also adds to the deflection to slow people and vehicles going through the intersection. So some of the other elements that we can look at and are going to be looked at in terms of the plan by the planning board really go towards should we raise the crosswalk? So should the crosswalk be at the same level as the sidewalk, which would provide more enhancement, more visual cues that somebody's crossing there? Should we stagger the crosswalk, which means, so what happens now in a roundabout, it's a little bit more difficult for visually impaired folks to walk through it because they don't have the cues from the sound of cars coming by as they typically would at a normal intersection because they're going around the circle. So a staggered crosswalk will push this crosswalk further away from the intersection. So they're getting the noise and vibration cues that they typically would get. But also, if the crossing's down here and say 2 vehicle lengths are here, it would allow 2 vehicles to stage while pedestrians crossing and not impacting the circulating flow through the roundabout. That's another option that we'll be looking at. Another option would be, do we replace the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that are already proposed with hawk signals? The hawk signal is, one was just put in at Flagler and Speedwell Avenue. Has the red lights at the top, 1 red light at the bottom. It stops traffic when a pedestrian wants to cross, but it's not a full traffic signal. So when there's not a pedestrian crossing, essentially vehicles can continue through. What it does provide is the ability for a push button that you see typical at traffic signal intersections. Push the button, it'll tell you when to cross or when not to cross. What it does add, potentially impacting vehicles going through, is that those vehicles need to stop. physically need to stop, and they may, stop and back into the roundabout. And that's what we're gonna look at. Does it make sense to put honk signals at this location? We'll look at that at the planning board. And some of the other things that we're looking at are a shared use path around the perimeter of the roundabout to accommodate bikes that aren't comfortable driving through a roundabout, riding their bike through the roundabout, and feel more comfortable dismounting, walking around, or potentially riding the bike around on a shared use path. So we'll look at that. And then finally, textured crossings that we'll also look at. So just to go back to what we were asked to look at, is the roundabout feasible at this location? Based on our review of the information that was provided by the applicant's traffic engineer, as well as independent reviews that we did and modeling that we did, we agree it's feasible at this location. Does the project improve the performance at this location? Again, based on our review of their information as well as our own independent review, we feel that it will improve the operations at this intersection. Does this project have an impact to the Market Street corridor or overall network? Generally, all the study area intersections operate at the same level, except the two that we had talked about, Morristown and Morristown. And finally, can we incorporate best practices for bikes, peds, vulnerable users at this intersection? And we can and we will at the planning board level, and we'll fully look and investigate those to see which ones make the most sense and which ones shouldn't move forward.
Morristown.